Springfield's Talk 1041. Hey, everybody. Good Tuesday morning. My name is Nick Reed. The White House says Biden absolutely did not apologize for calling Laken Riley's killer an illegal. He just regrets doing it. The gift that keeps on giving. This really is a sign of people whose only real conviction is clinging to power. But if you notice that, there's no real conviction about, when it comes to this situation, the people who are, like many of you, and see, here we are allowing certain people to break the law. We are allowing certain people in certain categories to evade any accountability for what they do. And so, of course, that breeds a lack of accountability amongst others. It draws in people who don't want to be held accountable. And then we see horrific results because of that, specifically in the case of Laken Riley, her brutal murder. And we go, that's wrong. It's just wrong. She is an innocent victim, unnecessarily so. And this piece of crap human being who came into this country illegally was here illegally. And it's a pretty simple, straightforward recognition of what's going on. But then there are people who frame every response to this situation based off, how is this going to affect me politically? That's all that it is. Other than that, the life of Laken Riley is meaningless. How do we deal with this Laken Riley problem in a way that is going to cause us the least amount of damage? That is the only thing that matters. Not right and wrong. Not good and evil. Not what policies facilitated this. Not the fact that this isn't an isolated incident, but we are seeing whether it's those who have been welcomed into this country illegally and protected from deportation when they commit violent crimes by way of sanctuary cities, but just throughout the entire country, particularly in blue counties where you have these prosecutors that create a culture in which criminals know that they aren't going to be held accountable in any meaningful way that causes them to potentially think maybe it's not worth it to be a criminal. No, it's all, how is this going to affect my power? And so the opening of it was just try to ignore the fact that Laken Riley was murdered. And then after days of people essentially calling out the Biden administration, and Joe Biden specifically, for 22 different mentions of George Floyd and what a wonderful citizen he was and how tragic it was that individual lost his life, but no mention of Laken Riley. So finally, days after being called out, the political calculation was, well, we better mention this girl because her whiny family and supporters won't stop yapping about her. So, a relatively vague social media posting is made about it. Then, of course, comes a State of the Union. Marjorie Taylor Greene pushes Biden. If he hadn't responded to her, none of this would be occurring, which is the brilliance of it all. He just couldn't help but go off script. Doesn't even get her name right. That's how little he is concerned about this individual. Then references the fact that, of course, he had to throw in, he knows what it's like because he lost his son, refers to the killer as illegal. Well, then the political calculations again come into play. What does this mean? Because you've got Democrats calling him out. How dare you be so cruel to that murderer? Oh, sure, you mislabeled her name, said her name wrong, but she's dead anyway. Who knows? There's a good chance she probably wouldn't have voted for you. She kind of looked like she was potentially a Trump supporter, kind of on the white side, and looked like she was middle to upper class or so, one of those types. She probably was going to be a Trump supporter anyhow, so. But that illegal alien, how dare you be so cruel as to label him illegal? So then Biden does the apology tour. Oh, I really regret it. I shouldn't have done that. Oh, boy. Boy, that was just wrong of me. So, of course, then the rational people respond to this, saying, this is what you are upset about? This is what you regret? Not your policies? Not the fact that this young girl her skull was crushed in by this maniacal monster in this country illegally? Not to mention that you didn't even get her name right, so little and care so little about her. Of course, he does have the memory issue. Of course, he did have a button in his hand with her name on it. Well, then the left is upset because, still the illegal thing. And then you got normal people that are upset because he apologized. So now the White House is back to, no, he didn't apologize. He didn't apologize. Because none of it is grounded in anything other than how does this affect us? How does this affect the reelection? What a sad way to go through life. Where you're tethered to no truth, no moral consistency, no greater being other than power. It must be exhausting. Not that people who have some sort of consistent moral compass don't at times struggle with decisions and what's right and wrong, but there's this place you go, It may be different for different people. As a Christian, those of you who are also Christian, we seek that truth from a place that we know. But you know it's there. You know where to go to seek it out. Can you imagine having on your watch, because of your policies, numerous people, and in this case specifically, just a girl going out for a jog, brutally beaten until her skull is crushed in. And your thought is, how do we navigate this so it doesn't hurt us in an election? What a horrifically sad and empty life to shuffle through. Going to get a look at the weather coming up here in a moment. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. I am Nick Reed. We are streaming live on YouTube. That sponsored by Springfield Wraps, designer of the KSGF studio. Now the latest news update. Well, that is exactly where we were all led to believe all those emergency dollars in the name of saving us from COVID were going to go, right? Sports complexes. I had pulled that story. I don't know if I have it. I didn't get it to it yesterday, but, really, we got to figure out how to spend this money. All this money that you just had Washington, D.C., telling us how much further we had to go into debt, and it was all in the name of, panicking, and we've got to save us from COVID. We've got to save the economy. We've got to, and it's just like all this money is laying around. Like, what do we use it for? I don't know. Sports complex over here, art over here. What? Hey, who needs something? That's exactly what we were told all this money would go for, isn't it? God forbid it just doesn't get spent and we don't go further into debt. I mean, let's not get crazy. First Alert Forecast sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Mostly sunny today, high near 73 with a 30% chance of scattered showers. Tonight, partly cloudy, 54. Mostly sunny, 77. Tomorrow, Thursday, a 50% chance of showers throughout the day, high near 76. So the White House spokesperson Olivia Dalton told reporters when asked why Biden apologized for calling the murder of Laken Riley an illegal, the alleged murder. And Olivia said, first of all, I want to be really clear about something. The president absolutely did not apologize. There was no apology anywhere in that conversation. He did not apologize. He used a different word. All right, well, so here's my follow-up question. So he's not sorry? Just keep this thing going. This would be a great question for Karine Jean-Pierre today. Olivia Dalton said he absolutely, in no uncertain terms, he did not apologize. So is Biden not sorry for calling him an illegal? Well, the president said that he should have used another term. Yeah, but is he not sorry? Is he or is he not sorry? I suspect if pressed, we will end up, as we do with so many stances from this administration, we won't get an answer. Sort of like a choose-your-own-adventure situation. You just pick whatever, ad lib. Apology, didn't apologize, whatever makes you feel good. Just go with that. It has become increasingly clear that this administration is becoming so hostile to the country of Israel that it has tipped the balance of our support in a meaningful way being on the side of Hamas. We have used our power as a voice in the world to continually hammer away at Israel to surrender to the demands of Hamas by way of a ceasefire, of which, by the way, the Israelis on numerous occasions have made ceasefire proposals. And true to form, Hamas has said, no, that's not good enough. Does this administration say, hey, listen, we gave you, listen, we tried to help you out here. You wanted a ceasefire. We decided to side with you. We demanded a ceasefire. A few times now, the Israelis have offered a ceasefire, and you've turned it down. You know what? We're done. No, that's not what we do. We continue to act as mouthpieces for Hamas, demanding their ceasefire. There are new reports out that, of course, there's the whole hot mic moment after the State of the Union in which Biden said that he was really, really telling Bibi Netanyahu. There are additional reports out that the administration is currently working to help Hamas by toppling the Netanyahu government. That they are internally and behind the scenes trying to essentially create chaos within the Israeli government, which of course would be a tremendous gift to Hamas. Now, first, Netanyahu, in the last 24 hours, sat down in an interview with Politico. And he responded to President Biden's comments on Sunday on MSNBC, claiming that Netanyahu is, quote, hurting Israel more than he's helping. Well, that's a great ally. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that wonderful? Can we, before we play the response from Netanyahu, back up a moment? You may recall, not long after October 7th, Donald Trump made a couple of comments publicly that didn't go over too well. One, he referenced the fact that Hamas, they were smart in the way they were carrying this out. Something, by the way, that Bill Clinton has said in the past. But because Donald Trump said it, of course, that means he's complimenting terrorists instead of recognizing the enemy. But he also was critical of Netanyahu, essentially saying that, hey, he didn't listen to me when it came to dealing with these folks, so, we're kind of seeing what happens. And across the political spectrum, people were critical of Trump. I felt it probably wasn't the best thing to say publicly right now. When this thing's all done and said, looking in retrospect, okay, but we're still in the heat of it all, it's not something that I would have said. But the left eviscerated Donald Trump. Eviscerated him. He was just as bad as the terrorists themselves. How could he possibly criticize Netanyahu? How dare he? While the world has come together. Now you have, of course, we've seen this unfold as time goes on. Biden flat out telling the world that Benjamin Netanyahu is hurting Israel. That he's the danger to the Israeli people. Now, of course, the same media that railed on Donald Trump for being critical of the way that Netanyahu had dealt with Hamas and not just going in and stuffing them out, which led to subsequent survival and then an attack on October 7th, are completely silent, not only silent, but backing up the assertion of Biden in criticizing Netanyahu. You know, this goes back to the opening of the show and the way that Democrats are dealing with Lake and Riley. That there's no moral consistency. There's no anchoring in anything that is true or right. It's just all about positioning every single day of the week, every second of every minute of every hour. You have to be 100% without question behind Netanyahu today, but tomorrow we can try to cut the knees out from underneath him. We can take the side of Hamas, helping them build infrastructure, forcing the Israelis to allow and participate in giving, quote, humanitarian aid, which, by the way, it's already been reported, and this is no surprise, Hamas is stealing most of it and selling it on the black market, to buy things like more missiles and ways to kill the Jews. So it's yet another way that we are helping the terrorist try and finish off the Holocaust. Regarding Biden's gift to Hamas in terms of public relation, that it is Netanyahu that is hurting the Israeli people, Netanyahu had this to say to Politico.
Well, I don't know exactly what the president meant, but if he meant by that I'm pursuing private policies against the majority, the wish of the majority of Israelis, and that this is hurting the interests of Israel, then he's wrong on both counts. Number one, these are not my private policies only. They're policies supported by the overwhelming majority of the Israelis. They support the action that we're taking to destroy the remaining terrorist battalions of Hamas. They say that once we destroy the Hamas, the last thing we should do is put in Gaza, in charge of Gaza, the Palestinian Authority that educates its children towards terrorism and pays for terrorism. And they also support my position that says that we should resoundingly reject the attempt to ram down our throats a Palestinian state. That is something that they agree on, and it's something that I think is also for the interests of Israel, because the majority of Israelis understand that if we don't do this, what we'll have is a repetition of the October 7th massacre, which is bad for Israel, bad for the Palestinians, bad for the future of peace in the Middle East. So the attempt to say that my policies are my private policies that are not supported by most Israelis is false. The vast majority are united as never before, and they understand what's good for Israel.
Now, the reference to the private policy is the administration, and Kamala Harris also echoed some of these comments, is trying to claim that what Netanyahu's doing is not what the Israeli people want. That he's sort of, these are his private beliefs separate from what the Israelis want. The Israelis actually are perfectly fine with at any given moment being at festivals, being at home, having their children and wives tortured and raped. That's just, it's part of the charm of being a Jew in Israel, and that they are actually opposed to the attempt to go after and completely eliminate Hamas. And Netanyahu's responding that no, in fact, most people in Israel kind of don't like that sort of thing happening. Netanyahu also last week rebuked Biden over his position of Rafah. Rafah is a city where Hamas, their last 4 battalions are. And in an effort, I guess, just to protect Hamas, Biden has said publicly that if the Israelis go in to try and take out Hamas's last 4 battalions, that will be a red line. Netanyahu said that, quote, whoever tells us not to operate in Rafah is telling us to lose the war, and that will not happen. So we are now actively in opposition to Israel when it comes to their war on terrorism. This from a president that just last week declared during the State of the Union that there's no president that's more pro-Israeli than he is. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Traffic update followed by a couple of new reports. One, that Biden is trying to collapse the Israeli government mid-war in what could be the single greatest gift to the terrorist organization Hamas. And also Biden's intelligence agency experts are saying that they believe that the way this will occur is protests that will occur, somewhat similar, I suppose, to the Black Lives Matter Antifa protests that we saw here in this country, that this formulation of the attempt to collapse the Israeli government by the Biden administration will in part at least be by so-called protests. So all of the latest information on those reports coming up. A great message on the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line regarding, this is Tom Martz, in fact, Netanyahu's comments to Politico. The observation, notice how Benjamin Netanyahu speaks better English than Biden and Harris combined. Objectively, that's true. First Alert Forecast, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements from Color 10. Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Mostly sunny 73 today with a 30% chance of scattered showers tonight, 54 for a low. Mostly sunny, high near 77 tomorrow and Thursday. A 50% chance of showers throughout the day with a high near 76. Having Emily Johnson with House Theory Realty represent us was a wonderful experience, says Megan. She's incredibly professional, thorough. Her communication with us superb. I'm sure she works with many clients at once, but she had a special way of making my husband and I feel like we were her top and only clients. Her advice and support helping us really narrow down our search area and home needs was invaluable. She was polite, available, friendly, very knowledgeable, and she always seemed to ask the great questions I didn't think to ask. This is the real estate agent you want on your side. I look forward to working with Emily again in the future should our home needs change. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. U.S. President Joe Biden is reportedly attempting to force the collapse of the Israeli government under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the middle of the war against Hamas terrorists in Gaza and a potential war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Biden has been increasingly hostile, of course, openly to Netanyahu, most recently declaring that Netanyahu was doing more harm to Israel than good. Now, New York Magazine is reporting that the Biden administration is actively looking for ways to force Netanyahu's government, which has been remarkably unified, to fall apart, which would bring about early elections. One Israeli expert frequently consulted by American officials says, quote, I have been asked by a serious administration figure what it is that will force Netanyahu coalition to collapse. They were interested in the mechanics. What we demand, which will collapse his coalition. I guess not only interfering in elections, but trying to collapse a government to force new elections isn't such a bad thing after all. This, again, we're told from the greatest supporter of Israel, because nothing says support like when a country is at war and unified behind its leadership, trying to break that apart. I think every book on leadership points in that direction. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence agencies are claiming that they expect protests to bring down the government and replace Netanyahu, who has been an obstacle to President Joe Biden's plans for the Middle East. Again, these people seem to forget what country they're supposed to be keeping watch of. I mean, the State of the Union, before Biden never even got to talking about the United States, he talked about 4 other countries. And here, because his plans for the Middle East aren't coming to be, they're going to try to topple the Israeli government. Much of it's coming from his intelligence community. The claims emerge in the latest annual threat assessment of the U.S. intelligence community and was published by both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times last night. Among the report, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly stated his opposition to post-war diplomacy with the Palestinian Authority towards territorial compromise. Well, of course not, because they want the Jews destroyed. You know what? And this is probably a term that has been used before. But what we are pushing is a soft Holocaust. Sure, we're not rounding the Jews up ourselves and putting them in train cars to ship them off to concentration camps. We're just leveraging our power in the world to force the Israelis, or to attempt to force the Israelis, to self-exterminate. To continue to allow the terrorists to exist, to reward the terrorists by giving them their own country. I mean, hell, we gave the Taliban a country. This administration has already given one terrorist organization their own country. He's looking to do it again. The Houthis must be very excited, hoping that they're third in line. Many observers have long suspected, according to the reports, the Biden administration of working to bring down the Israeli government through a, quote, color revolution. A State Department-funded group was at the core opposition to Netanyahu's judicial reform, and then Ambassador Tom Nides was described as the, quote, arsonist in chief, as he openly supported the Israeli opposition movement and the protests. President Biden also froze Netanyahu out, refusing to meet with him for months, because he's the biggest supporter of Israel ever. Polls show that the vast majority of Israelis support Netanyahu's positions of opposing a Palestinian state, backing the continuation of the war until Hamas's complete defeat, and preparing for possible war against Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. Polls also indicate that the vast majority of Americans support Netanyahu's approach to the war and oppose Biden's approach, which has been to appease terror and dissenting left-wing and Muslim American voters. What's interesting about this is you don't really get much pushback when it's revealed. The administration is not out there saying, no, we fully support Netanyahu and his efforts. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's a pretty remarkable thing how the administration, these people, it's just beyond imagination. That Trump is the one that we're told is the danger, that Trump was somehow a danger to Israel. And this administration rolling out the soft Holocaust. Every step of the way is one step closer to the dream of the anti-Semites to eliminate the Jewish people, to eliminate Israel. The open hostility towards the Israeli government, the fact that the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, both last night having these same reports, show that this is a leak that is coming from somewhere within our government, which means that this is a deliberate attempt to make sure the world knows that we want the Israeli government toppled. That's why it's being put out there. This is not an accident. This is the aid and comfort that Hamas desperately needs, along with the pledge during our State of the Union that American troops, were going to be committed to helping rebuild the infrastructure for Hamas that they used in order to launch their attack on October 7th. That's what that port was. Hamas has no greater, I don't know that the Biden administration has made America a greater ally to Hamas than Iran is, but we're certainly up there. We are going to prove, and the Biden administration seems intent on proving, that we can be just as beneficial to Hamas as we were to the Taliban. And all the other terrorist organizations line up because apparently this is our place in the world now. Funding terrorism, supporting terrorism, and giving terrorists their own countries. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Streaming live, KSGF.com. A couple of text messages. Pyramid Roofing Company talking text line. Remember when Obama sent operatives to Israel to work against Netanyahu's election, then refused to meet with him when he showed up in Washington? Another asking, how much do you think Obama is behind this to topple Israel? Bet his hands are all over it behind the scenes. And there have been notations that this is Obama legacy. And the thing is, I don't know that it's necessarily Obama behind the scenes, but the people that were part of the Obama administration are in the Biden administration. It's the same people. Whether you're talking about the State Department, you're talking about the Pentagon, you're talking about the White House itself, and some of that, I mean, they're ideologically in the same little grouping, but some of them are the exact same people that were brought back. And there is this hostile position under the Biden administration that was a carryover from the Obama administration towards Israel. And it is a soft Holocaust. If they get their way, it will, whether it's their intent or not, lead to the eventual elimination of Israel. This is what they would want. Biblically, they may have some obstacles to overcome. But we shouldn't be surprised that the same international results that we have involvement in that occurred during the Obama years are happening during the Biden years because, again, same people. Whether it is chaos in the Middle East, it is a Putin that is advancing through Ukraine, it is an Iran that is increasing their nuclear capabilities, it is a North Korea that is becoming more hostile. It isn't a coincidence that the same chaos and danger that developed during the Obama years when it comes to international relations and international issues are being mirrored in the Biden administration. Same people, same mindset. So you get the same results. Yesterday, Joe Biden talking about former Senator John McCain.
Not long ago, my buddy John McCain passed away. My predecessor, friend, that's how he ended his career.
So evidently, John McCain posthumously got upgraded to winning that election that he ran against Obama, as you've got Biden there declaring that he was Biden's predecessor. Sharp as attack this guy is, though. Do not forget he is sharp as attack. Major and, to somewhat degree, hilarious controversy with the GOP in Kansas. This will be a short one, but it's just, again, hypocrisy written all over it. That next, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thanks. Sometimes there is a stigma that surrounds gun shops. If you've ever been in one, whether you were just looking to buy or just to look, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, the reason I mention this is because that stigma, it just simply does not exist at Quick Draw Gun in Monette. Now, Brad and his team, they are down to earth. They are always ready to help you, whether you are looking to buy, sell, or just have questions. That is what makes them a great place to purchase your first ever firearm. And they also have hundreds of accessories to choose from as well. They have great selection for holsters. For my ladies out there, they have a ton of concealed carry purse options to choose from. And they also offer custom Cerakoting and laser engraving to really make your new purchase custom for you. They back our first responders and our military. They offer a discount, and I simply couldn't recommend them enough. So if it is time to add to that firearm collection, Quick Draw Gun in Monette is the place to go. They're easy to find. They're just right behind the Taco Bell there in Monette. And of course, if you need their phone number or that actual physical address, you can find all of that under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
KCTV, Johnson County, Kansas. A display at a Johnson County GOP fundraiser featuring a model of President Joe Biden being attacked by people has sparked outrage from both sides of the aisle. Well, of course. Of course. This includes the former state of Kansas GOP chairman, while demanding the state of Kansas and Johnson County GOP chairs resign. Former GOP chair Mike Kuckelman believes federal agents should investigate the event at the Overland Park Convention Center. In the video on social media, attendees can be seen kicking the model or hitting it with their fist and a bat. It's been shared repeatedly. Kuckelman saying, I think the United States Secret Service should be investigating the leaders who put the event on and those who participated in this. So not only those who did it, because, freedom of speech stuff, whatever, but the people who put on the event itself. Neither the Johnson County nor Kansas GOP responded to KCTV5 for an interview, but released a statement on Facebook firing back, noting a disgruntled former member of the state party who did not attend the event saw an opportunity to capitalize on the poor judgment of the outside exhibitor. No one from KSGOP leadership, that's Kansas GOP, or staff even attended the event or had input on exhibitors. It's unfortunate that the event took place. Maria Holliday, chair of the Johnson County GOP, added the Johnson County Republican Party's successful series of events last weekend was tarnished by a brief incident where a mask depicting President Biden was added to an outside exhibitor interactive self-defense display. The mask was regrettably removed. No one collected or solicited any funds or donations in exchange for hitting the trained by. So here's what you got. You got one of these dummy things, self-defense. You've seen these before, Taekwondo dojos and these other places. And, it's the upper body with no arms of a guy. And apparently somebody, put a Biden mask on it, and people are like, ha ha, and they're punching it and everything. And so now, of course, outrage. Now, you and I, we all know what as Americans we were subjected to during the Trump years, depictions of Trump's assassinations. I mean, hell, we had a Democrat state senator in Missouri openly on social media tell her followers, I sure wish someone would assassinate Donald Trump. This was not uncommon at all. And we were told free speech may be distasteful and so forth. The hysterics of this. Number one, you can expect it from Democrats. I don't know anything about the internal workings of the GOP in Kansas, but for where you got people, there's a vendor there, self-defense, got one of those dummies that you utilize for practicing sparring or whatever, and they put a Biden mask on it, and then somebody films somebody, beating it up and everything, and they're having a bunch of guffaws, laughing and joking, whatever. For this to be treated as if it was some sort of for federal investigators, I'm not saying it was tasteful. And we all know Republicans aren't allowed to have a good time like that. And I know, well, we're supposed to be better. Okay, fine. But can we not have adult, mature responses that are measured to situations like this? You know, be like, yeah, probably wasn't the best thing to do. Instead of having the earth is melting down and I mean, come on. Like a bunch of screaming toddlers who had their toys taken away. Robert Hur, of the special counsel, the investigator that caused so much turmoil within the Democrat Party because of his explanation as to why he was not recommending charges against President Biden regarding the illegal stealing of classified documents, in which it was in the report, despite Biden's declaration that the report found that he did not do so. It did the opposite. It noted specifically the illegal actions of then Vice President and then former Vice President Joe Biden. But, of course, he had noted that there was the mental issue. He is going to be testifying, and there has already been some of his opening statements released. And there is an aspect to those prepared remarks that I think could put a different, and not a positive, but a whole different view of those findings, and not positive for the Biden administration or for America. And it's a wording issue that for some people may seem like it's no big deal whatsoever, but this guy's an attorney, and I want to share with you some of what that opening statement is coming up here in just a moment. First, I did think I wanted to play some audio again of Biden to kick off the hour. It's short audio, and I played earlier some audio, and Biden's I don't even know where he was. There's a small group of people. And at one point, he talked about John McCain being his predecessor, which, of course, John McCain was never elected to the presidency. But at some point, he finished up his comments. And then Joe Biden did what he oftentimes does that requires his handlers to step in, and that is ask, am I allowed to take questions? And I want to play for you, this is the video feed, okay, of Biden wrapping things up, and then he's sort of looking around like, oh, I don't know, am I allowed to ask? And everyone laughs because everyone pretends like he's cracking some new joke for the first time, when in reality everyone knows what's going on here, and he just doesn't know whether he's not allowed to ask questions. But I want you'll hear it's a video feed, but by the audio you're going to understand what occurs here.
Anyway, am I allowed to take any questions? Anybody here to stay?
They just got the feed. They're trying to quietly. If you listen real carefully, you can hear his handlers like trying to get him out of there. Like, no, you're not going to ask. But then whomever is on the Biden team in charge of the video feed, it just gets cut off right there. And you got the color scheme on there, the off-air imagery, and it's just so absolutely perfect. It's not the first time that's happened where they either play music over him when he starts to go off script, or they just cut the feed off completely. I just want to make a real short comment here because of something I said yesterday, and subsequent to that, there was a news item that is relevant to something I mentioned yesterday. We were talking about it being International Women's Day on, I think it was Friday, and how over the past couple of years, the left have really tried to push men into the framework here, including the White House, and that wasn't real prevalent this year. Well, Lady Gaga, who I actually believe to be one of the most talented musical artists currently out there. One of. I'm not saying the most, but she's one of them. I like her. I like her music. I like her stuff. But she's very into all this left-wing stuff. And she had posted a picture with Dylan Mulvaney, the guy that essentially mocks women, but he pretends like he's a little girl. And he was, at one point, of course, hired to be a spokesperson on social media for Bud Light. That's what started that whole thing. And as you can imagine, a lot of people really pushed back. They were critical that on International Women's Day, Lady Gaga chose to have a man who pretends to be a woman in her photo to highlight International Women's Day. That was her whole point. So she responded in a lengthy post yesterday on Instagram. She wrote that she had seen headlines saying that she and Mulvaney were facing backlash. She hit back saying that it wasn't backlash, it was hatred and violence. There was no actual violence, but nonetheless. She said, I feel very protective in this moment, not only of Dylan, but of the trans community who continue to lead the way with their endless grace and inspiration in the face of constant degradation, intolerance, physical, verbal, mental violence. I certainly do not speak for this community, but I have something to say. I hope all women will come together and honor all for International Women's Day. And may we do that always until the day that all women are celebrated equally, that all people are celebrated equally. Now, here's the thing, and I think this is what a lot of people who are part of that world and feel a connection to it and a purpose there. You can celebrate, love, honor, respect, defend the trans community without telling women that who they are is up for grabs. You don't have to tell women that what identifies, that what actually makes them a woman is irrelevant in order to, quote, honor or celebrate trans. That seems to be the problem here. You can, all you want, go to the drag shows, go to the parades, say they're the most wonderful people in the world, but you don't have to eliminate what makes a woman in order to do that. This is where a lot of people who are activists don't understand where the conflict comes about. They love to point out, they're like, oh, drag queens, they've existed forever. Cross-dressers that you may have seen, and as I have, it'll be a posting from some activists thinking that they're making their point, and it'll be a picture of all these people in drag, for, even Mrs. Doubtfire and men dressing as women. And they're like, this has been around forever. I don't know why this is a problem all of a sudden. Well, because back then, they weren't claiming that they were really, really, truly women. They were claiming that they were portraying themselves as women. And they weren't demanding that they be able to replace women in sports or take showers with them. That is where the difference came about. And so this belief somehow that some people have that you have to eliminate the exclusivity of what a woman actually is in order to be friends with or friendly with men who pretend to be women isn't true. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, some of these people seem insistent on doing just that. A look at the weather here in just a moment. Right now, the latest news update. The First Alert forecast, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. From Color 10 Fox 49, meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Mostly sunny with a high near 73 today. A 30% chance of scattered showers tonight, low of 54. 77 and sunshine tomorrow. Thursday, a 50% chance of showers throughout the day, high near 76. got to share this. I believe in the State of the Union there was the virtue signaling about where Biden tried to portray conservatives as book banners. This is another great gaslighting. And as I've noted, for the most part, most of the discussion is not actually about banning books. It's about what venues in which they're appropriate. And on the right, if we're going to sort of group this all together on the political spectrum and social spectrum, people that have concerns about books, it's with public schools, elementary school kids, and pornography. And they don't want it. They're not telling you as a parent, hey, if you want to have smut in your home with your kids, that's your thing, whatever. But they're saying, I don't want my kid to have it, so it should not be provided to my child. You should not have the ability to dictate that my child be provided pornography in the public schools. The left, they also support, regardless of their denials, the, quote, banning, if you will, of books. But theirs aren't pornography. That's what they like. It's thought, politics. I bring this up because in response to the book bans, RuPaul, most of you know RuPaul, drag performer and television host, co-founded the all-inclusive online bookstore Allstora that would carry, quote, all books ranging from genderqueer to Mein Kampf to support all voices everywhere. Guess how long it took before they began banning books? 3 days. 3 days. It took 3 days for the all books, because book banning is horrible and evil, and we support everyone's ideas, or at least their ability to express their ideas. 3 days after launching the website, the bookstore reversed its policy on offensive books. Well, see, those don't count. This is how the left is with everything. Free speech, everything else. Well, except for the speech that we don't agree with. If it's offensive, that doesn't count, see. Some of the books removed included works by Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Matt Walsh, Riley Gaines, and Libs of TikTok founder Shia Rashik. When it launched 3 days ago, at the time David Strom wrote a story. I don't know if this originated National Review. I think it ended up on Hot Air at some point. When it launched, 3 days prior to the writing of the story, RuPaul's online bookstore, co-founded with historian of LGBT plus politics Eric Cervini and drag queen performer Adam Powell, welcomed visitors to the website with a pop-up message that warned you may find books you disagree with. A subsection about offensive books on the FAQ page stated that Allstora has made the decision to carry all books. Allstora said that, quote, censorship of any book, perspective, or story is incompatible with the survival of democracy, and banning books is never the answer. It took 3 days for them to reverse that. These people are such... Now, nothing surprises me with the left. But I do wonder, how is it... Like, I wish I were there for that evolution from the self-righteous banning of any book, no matter how offensive it is a danger to our democracy, to within 3 days going, oh, well, yeah, we should start banning books. We should start becoming, because by their own definition, this bookstore is a danger to democracy. That it is, in their words, incompatible with the survival of democracy. All Store revisited its FAQ page to add a disclaimer and introduce a flagging mechanism. Given the offensive material, Astora would mitigate the potential harm of specific books by creating a community-led flagging system for titles that are contrary to our core values and donating all proceeds from those titles to fight book bans. Lady Bunny, a drag performer who has appeared on RuPaul's drag-themed television show, condemned the bookstore for selling books by Hitler, Mike Huckabee, of course, Mike Huckabee, Sarah Sanders, and the extremely transphobic Shia Raichik. She's the libs of TikTok, in which all she ever does is repost left-wing TikToks. The drag performer said, why not just stop selling what many on the left consider to be hate speech? Another saying, you can buy Matt Walsh's What is a Woman, a book widely criticized as transphobic in nature, and one written by an author who, in my opinion, as a gay man, is absolutely homophobic. You can buy anti-trans far-right books from RuPaul's new online bookstore. All Store revised its FAQ page again, entirely removing its policy on offensive books. The website no longer pledges to sell all books. Isn't that just absolutely perfect? National Review, they do have a separate piece. RuPaul's all-inclusive anti-censorship bookstore immediately removes right-wing titles. You see what I mean when I say these people have no anchored morality? They will switch on a dime when it suits them. You see, the anti-censorship weapon they use, they only use it when they think it's something that can be used to make the political opposition look bad. So when you have parents that don't want pornography in elementary schools, they portray it as book banning. And they get out there on their righteous high horses and they open up these bookstores and they go on and on about how censorship in any form whatsoever, no matter how offensive it is the antithesis to democracy. It is horrible, it's awful, it's tantamount to the Nazis. Then, just on a dime. Well, what about these books? Well, that's okay. That's different, see. That doesn't count. Empty vessels, these people are. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Couple of things here. Number one, we are in the second round of the Biden's Best Moment bracket, sponsored by Pyramid Roofing Company. Up for grabs. The winner will receive 10 ounces silver. It is the Mount Trumpmore 10-ounce silver. It's a depiction of Mount Rushmore with a fifth president upon it, and that would be Donald Trump. That prize provided by Pyramid Roofing Company. Your entry to be in the drawing for that prize is to participate in the Biden's Best Moment bracket. Every week that you participate will be an entry, okay? Last week was the first week. It's been whittled down. Just go on KSGF.com, participate, and choose. There are videos. Some of the moments are more audio-driven, while some are more video-driven, some a combination of the two. Also, I was having a conversation with the guys at Ozark Stove and Chimney yesterday. There is a company out of Norway, which you may or may not know this, can have pretty brutal winters. And it's called Jotol. It's spelled with a J, but it's Norwegian, so it's a Y sound. Jotul. They do wood stoves. And this Norwegian company has been making these for like 157 or 170 some years, for a very, very long time. These are premium. Now, I don't remember the exact details or understand them necessarily, but they have a couple of these that are up for grabs at no cost. Now, I want to explain this, okay? And I think that as of yesterday, they had two of them. And it was one, sometimes you're big companies and you're influential and you do a fantastic job at your job. And so you get perks with that. And sometimes that involves companies being like, hey, here's a little bonus sort of situation. Here's something promotional item that you can give away. And again, I don't know the exact circumstances of this, but what I do know is that they have said, hey, we want to go ahead and they gave me the heads up on this to let you all know so that you all can essentially have first dibs. Now, that is if they still exist. There are a couple of them. There is now, with that being said, there is a cost for installation and then, piping that's necessary, and you may need a stove pad and so forth. The stove itself is $1,600. That cost is not going to be something that you have to cover. So you're essentially talking about, I did the math, about 40% of the cost they're eating for you, okay? If you are now, the website, I know I give it out. I don't give the phone number very often just because you don't, you're driving around and you think, oh, just look up Ozark Stove and Chimney. But I am going to give that phone number so you can call them. I'm not sure if they open at 7 or if they open at 8, but leave a voicemail if this is something that you're interested in. Because, again, this is not going to last very long at all. And it is an incredible deal from an incredible company. If you want at least to find out, this isn't like, oh, I called and that means that I have to commit to this. That's not what this is at all. But if you're interested in the Jotol wood stove, give them a call at Ozark Stove and Chimney, 417-201-6585. That's 417-201-6585. Now, if you're driving and you're trying to write it down, you didn't get it, don't worry. Again, go to ozarkstoveandchimney.com. Of course, Ozark Stove and Chimney, they've got the CSIA certified technicians, and they'll do the installation and everything. And like I said, while there's still some costs that are involved, you're going to save about 40% because that $1,600 wood stove that is going, they've got a couple of them that are essentially free for the KSGF listeners. 201-6585, and again, ozarkstoveandchimney.com. You can also find them, ksgf.com, under Nick's endorsements. Now, whomever it is that's listening right now that ends up doing this, taking advantage of it, I want to, after it's all said and done, I would love for you to send some pics and give some feedback to the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line, because it's a pretty big deal. And, I just want to see what it all looks like once it's all done and taken care of. Coming up, we've got some of the opening testimony of Robert Hur. This is regarding the decision to not charge Biden for his illegal activities regarding classified documents that he took illegally. The White House, as you can imagine, is pushing back on this, but I think there's a very interesting, to me, it's very specific verbiage that shines light on this in a different way that is not positive for the Biden administration. Not that it was to begin with, but perhaps even worse than we first knew. First Alert Forecast sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. From Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Mostly sunny with a high near 73 today, a 30% chance of scattered showers tonight with a low around 54. Mostly sunny, a high near 77 tomorrow, and a 50% chance of showers throughout the day. Thursday with a high near 76. I want a greathomeloan.com. So I saw yesterday Alex Carricker had posted something about new home buyer or first-time home buyers. And oftentimes we hear about those incentives. And he noted that if you have not owned a home in 3 years, for all intents and purposes, you are considered a first-time home buyer. Now, I know you may be saying, but that doesn't make sense. Hey, I don't know. It's government does this stuff, right? So if maybe you owned a home once upon a time, you've been renting for the last several years, you haven't owned a home for some time, and you think that whatever advantages there are, whatever sort of incentives and credits that the first-time home buyer can get, you may qualify for that. That's the sort of inside information you get when you utilize the Carrickers and their team for all your home loan needs. I want a greathomeloan.com because you do. Robert Hur, in his prepared opening testimony to the House Judiciary Committee, will say that his, quote, report reflects my best effort to explain why I declined to recommend charging President Biden for his mishandling of classified records. Quote, my assessment in the report about the relevance of the president's memory was necessary and accurate and fair. Most importantly, what I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows and what I expect jurors would perceive and believe. I do not sanitize my explanation, nor do I disparage the president unfairly. I explained to the Attorney General my decision and the reason for it. That's what I was required to do. Now, that is an important note here. while the media tried to spread the disinformation that that was unnecessary information. As he notes here, it is absolutely necessary. He was required, as anyone in his position, to explain his decision, whether it was a decision to charge now President Biden with the crimes he committed or to not charge him. And so he did just that. He goes on to say, or he will go on to say in his opening testimony, I analyze the evidence as prosecutors routinely do by assessing its strengths and weaknesses, including by anticipating the ways in which the president's defense lawyers might poke holes in the government's case if there were a trial, and seek to persuade jurors that the government could not prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. There has been a lot of attention paid to language in the report about the president's memory. So let me say a few words about that. Now, this is where I think it gets very interesting. He is slated to say in his opening testimony, my task was to determine whether the president retained or disclosed national defense information willfully, meaning knowingly and within the intent to do something the law forbids. I could not make that determination without assessing the president's state of mind. Now, I think that this is a much, much different presentation than we have had up until this point. Because the state of mind component to this has been in the context of his ability to stand trial. And whether or not the well-meaning but forgetful Joe Biden would get a sympathetic jury because of his state of mind, thereby making it a scenario in which it is felt that he is likely to get away with it, okay? But this wording suggests that the context of state of mind wasn't simply regarding the trial, but the crime itself. So again, according to the pre-release transcript of his opening statement here, he says, my task was to determine whether the president retained or disclosed national defense information willfully. Now he puts willful in quotes. So he's focusing on that he's saying, listen, my job, whether or not he willfully did this, this was something he deliberately did. Meaning, in the words of her, knowingly and with the intent to do something the law forbids, I could not make that determination without assessing the president's state of mind. So what this opening statement is shifting here from what we had been discussing was the state of mind issue apparently was not simply coming into play in Robert Hur's decision what to do regarding how it would impact the trial, but apparently also in his assessment as to whether or not Joe Biden knew what he was doing when he illegally took those documents. So the reason that this is a shift is because this isn't just noting that the president has issues with being senile, cognitive decline, dementia, whatever, now, but Robert Hur is of the belief that potentially he was suffering from this at the time he illegally took the documents. Now, it may not be something that, because we've heard about these documents being taken for decades. And I suspect that, I don't know, on one hand you think, well, the assessment here may be he was senile during the final months in which he was illegally taking documents, but not the previous decades. But we don't really know where that line is, and so you can't make a determination, well, he wasn't senile when he took these versus those, so, just make this blanket declaration that because we don't know at what point he was too senile to know whether or not he was violating the law, we just won't charge him at all. And I'm sure I don't know if these will be discussions that are had publicly or that will come about with the questioning. But I hope that this isn't overlooked. I hope that this isn't noticed as there are questions asked of Robert Hur, because this is a very important distinction. And whether or not Robert Hur, as it sounds here in his opening statement, recognized the cognitive decline and the mental inability of Joe Biden to stand trial as part of his decision making, but is this mental decline something that you think affected him when he was taking the documents illegally? So in other words, he didn't know what he was doing. Because if that's the case, then this is a recognition of what, of course, so many of us have known for some time, that this cognitive decline issue isn't something brand new. This is something that has been vexing Joe Biden for some time. The White House is obviously pushing back on this. They are going to try to claim, I imagine, that it's taken out of context, that we all forget things every once in a while. And for the Republicans, the very simple response to this is we can settle it by having all of the transcripts released. This is something that the White House has refused to do. This was a request that was made to try and clear this up. I'm not sure if there was any videotaping. I think generally speaking, videos are, in any deposition, it just seems as if that's a pretty standard thing. Lord knows during the Clinton years, because those videos were eventually released, his depositions during the whole Lewinsky deal. If, in fact, this is an unfair assessment, if, in fact, this is just some political hack that is trying to make Joe Biden look bad, release all of it, and then let the American people decide. After all, this was behind closed doors, and everything we've been told that behind closed doors, that's where the real Joe Biden shines. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. Skip wrote about the Pyramid Roofing Company. Excellent roofing company. I recently needed help Finding a leak. They fixed the leak without charging me. I highly recommend their services. They are fast, friendly, and reliable. They send photos of all their work before and after, and I cannot say enough about this company, especially nowadays when it's a miracle if you even get a call back from a contractor. Special shout out to Josh for his professionalism and willingness to help. I will use Pyramid for any future roof repairs or replacements. And that's what you get with the Pyramid Roofing Company. Whenever you call them out, don't expect a 2-hour PowerPoint presentation. Don't expect them to use scare tactics. Don't expect that used car salesman approach. But what you can expect from the Pyramid Roofing Company is that they are going to be upfront and honest with you. If you need a whole new roof, they are going to tell you that. But if your roof just needs a simple roof repair, they're going to point you in that direction. So whenever it is time to call the Pyramid Roofing Company, you can find all of that contact information under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Red State has this story that is based off of a Daily Wire story regarding CVS. And the headline, CVS makes future managers confess their privilege, promise not to promote merely on merit. This is DEI stuff. And some of what was reported are these worksheets, I suppose, if you will, for employees. And one of them reads, my personal commitment for moving forward, allyship and advocacy. Groups I can be an advocate for, and then you have to fill in the blank. It's important to create a culture of advocacy at CVSH and in the GMDP because... It's important to create a culture of advocacy on my team because specific actions I can take to be a better advocate within my team. Another provision is potential managers confessing their crappiness, as written by Red State. The personal bias I want to address is addressing this personal bias will impact the CVS HGMDP culture by the inclusivity trait I want to develop is developing this trait will impact our inclusive culture by. So, what is CVS just a cult now? Yeah, I've been watching, I guess because they pop up in my feed because I watched one. And it's interesting because some of the, what would be considered a quote cult, they're not really presented that way any longer. They can come in a number of forms. There's a documentary, for example, on... I think it's Netflix, and it was about some dating site that essentially ended up being considered a cult. And, you know, it's just, I think there's 3 or 4 different episodes, and you come across more and more of these. That it's not like the sort of traditional, hey, we're a cult, like Jim Jones or David Koresh. It couches itself as something else, like a dating site or a, be at peace with yourself site. Not that all of those sites are obviously cults, but that eventually is what it becomes. And so one of the things about these documentaries that I do find interesting is that so much of it is footage of the cult leaders themselves and the followers because they do so much via Zoom. They will have these followers all over the world sometimes. And so you get to see and hear so much of the verbiage that's used. And when I read some of these things that are part of the DEI and CRT, it is mimicking so much of the cult verbiage, the self-declarations that cult members are expected to make, where they essentially break themselves down. They have to pick themselves apart. They have to confess all of the ways that they're a contaminant to culture, a contaminant to our society in order to make themselves pure once again. And it's all about how can I contribute to the greater good. And it's just amazing when you watch enough of those documentaries, because there's themes that are very similar. One of the themes, incidentally, is that it's not stupid people who get sucked into these things. It is all walks of life. It's one thing if you ever study or follow or just, learn about cults and the people in cults. You cannot peg individuals based off of intelligence or career. That you get all walks of life that will get involved in cults. But the other theme is this sort of self-confession for the good of the cause of the cult itself. And Scientology is very big into this. What little information has come out in Scientology, and I forget what they call it, but there's a lot of the confessing that goes on, and you have to admit of the horrible things that you've done. That's the only way that you can lift yourself up in the hierarchy of these cults, is to really just recognize and confess what a horrible person you are and how you can be a better advocate for the cause. And I'm telling you, when you read through these companies, whether it's CVS or local governments that do this DEI training, it is the exact same approach. It is the exact same. The treatment from the leaders of the organizations to the members of the organizations, it is the exact same sort of requirement. It is the demanding that you confess to all of us, to the leadership, how you have wronged yourself, how you have wronged the community as a whole, and what steps you can take in order to do better. And I think that that's a pretty remarkable, a remarkable similarity, parallel between DEI, CRT, and what it is that these cults do in order to bring their followers into the fold and their demanding of obedience. Springfield's Talk 104.1, a traffic update. I'm Nick Reed. There's another similarity that you notice if you study cults, follow cults, the behavior, the teachings, and DEI and CRT, and that is how people who use intellectual curiosity to question the teachings, whether it's inconsistencies or to say, well, this doesn't seem right, and that is to label you as a contaminant, to label you as a traitor or as a negative force, to where you are outed. You are pushed out of the cult. And that's exactly what we see when it comes to CRT and DEI. They tell you, just like in cults, oh, we're all open-minded for open conversation. But the minute you start questioning the teaching, the indoctrination, then you are a danger to the community and you get pushed out. Inflation comes in hotter than expected in February as high prices persist. Labor Department announcing today the Consumer Price Index, the broad measure of price of everything goods, including gas, groceries, rent, rose 0.3% in February from the previous month. Prices climbed 3.2% from the same time last year, faster than the 3.1% headline figure that was forecasted by economists. So, in other words, it's getting worse, not better. But we should ignore those numbers. Well, I got to tell you, as we were listening to some of the reports and during the news at the top of the hour, and of course, Town Hall has some reporting there. But the news outlets have gotten their hands on some of the information from this report that Robert Hur put together, in which he explained why it is that Joe Biden would not be charged. And, of course, so much of the headlines were regarding his memory. And the presentation at the time was that the memory question was in regards to standing trial. But apparently it extends beyond that, retroactively, I suppose, to his time when he took the documents. And listening to CBS, it sounds like this is going to be great. Essentially, and Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is my understanding of CBS as they were talking about what they were learning, that Biden's defense pretty much is like, I don't know. I leave stuff laying around all the time. I
Yep.
don't know how it got there.
That's pretty accurate.
That's the defense.
Oh.
Well, I just leave things out on my desk, and people may take it. That's what
I don't
CBS.
know how those documents got there. They just showed up.
Now, this is, of course, going to be labeled as a defense of Biden. This will be the defense, as if that is a good thing. That classified document, it would honestly, in terms of the impact potentially on national security, it would be better if he was like, yeah, I knew exactly what was going on with him the whole time. I kept him. I know I probably shouldn't have, but past vice presidents have done it. I thought maybe I'd write a book. I didn't think that this stuff was, really that big of a deal. Now, it would have been illegal to do that, but at least then you would at least have, I suppose, the confidence to some degree in believing that, well, he knew where they were at all times. Biden's defense, apparently, and this will, again, be used as a way to defend him, is that it wasn't that he just didn't, he just kind of a pack rat and would leave things laying around all the time, and he doesn't know who took what, when, where, how it ended up in all these places. Now, if we really, as the media, before Biden got implicated in all this stuff and it was all about Trump, who knew exactly where everything was, about national security, the dangers of national security, they portrayed Trump having documents in a secure location under lock and key and Secret Service protection as if it was in the lobby of Mar-a-Lago, where just, tourists could browse through it and look at things. And this was tremendous national security dangers of this country that just anyone could have access to. Here's Biden openly acknowledging he has no idea who had access to this stuff. That's his defense. I don't know. I don't know who took stuff off my desk. I don't know who put these things in boxes and who put them over here. I don't know who put them in my private residence over there. I don't know who put it in the garage. Now, you tell me which has vastly greater national security implications. Donald Trump is former president of the United States, who is the person that declassifies things, having it under lock and key and Secret Service protection, or a guy who says, I don't know who took stuff. Apparently, he also just up and declared, this is in the report, that he determined stuff was overclassified anyhow. Oh, okay. So Trump as president is the only president, apparently, who isn't allowed to declassified information for whatever reason. That was never explained. But Biden, who as vice president, has no authority to declassify, but he can determine it was overclassified, and that's why it was okay for him to take it or leave it laying around for other people to take and to end up in places he didn't even know how it got there. Well, this is all very clear at this point. I think that I'm sure the accurate assessment will be that this proves Joe Biden is perfectly fit to be president. He did absolutely nothing wrong whatsoever, and this is just a political hit piece. During the CBS discussion that we were listening to during the break, the reporter at the White House was talking to the person back at CBS, and it was noted the portion of the report in which Biden, he couldn't remember his son's death, when his son died. And then Biden was, how dare he ask about that? And then we learned that actually he didn't ask about that. No one asked about that. That was something Biden offered up for whatever reason, trying to figure out a timeline or something. CBS declared in their reporting earlier that the assessment that he could not remember when his son died wasn't true. He remembered it was in May. Now, he got the year wrong, they said, but that's irrelevant. Oh, okay. So that's how that works now. Let's get a news update. First Alert forecast sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Color 10 Fox 49, meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Don't know why I said that so weirdly. Mostly sunny today, high of 73, 30% chance of scattered showers tonight, 54 for a low. Sunny 77 tomorrow, and a 50% chance of showers Thursday, high of 76. Also in the Her report, apparently Biden blames everyone else, claiming that he has no idea how the documents were illegally removed from the White House and put in his, garage and pen, where, all these other places. He claims that, my staff, they just did stuff. They didn't take direction from me. They just did it. Okay, well, then I guess we should find out who those people are. And those individuals should be indicted. If it wasn't Joe Biden, what a classy guy. Does the buck ever stop with this guy? Is there anything that he's responsible for that he's actually responsible for?
That's true Democrat fashion right there.
Yeah.
Blaming one another, eating their own. Yep.
I don't know. It's just, of course, if you ask him what staff are, I don't know that either. I guess that is, this is going to be the defense.
Does he even know what year he was vice president? Or years?
I don't know. He probably knows what year butterscotch pecan ice cream got released.
Mint chocolate chip.
We're also going to be treated to, I imagine, Democrats claiming that every moment of senility that is described is something that, that's normal. We're going to be told that's, everyone forgets things like, the year that a family member died or, well, everyone. I mean, just last week I sat down a to-go menu and I went about doing some work, and then I couldn't remember where I put it. It's the same thing. We all do this. I mean, this is just nitpicking, isn't it? Okay. A new poll out shows a majority of Democrats oppose certification of the 2024 election if Trump wins. This is what we're told is the definition of inciting an insurrection. Anytime it's been noted that Trump didn't actually say anything to incite an insurrection, Trump incited an insurrection. Oh, really? What did he say? Where's the audio of this? Can we have what a transcript of what he said? They tried for a while, and they still do sometimes, try and claim that speech, he incited people to insurrect during the speech. Isn't it funny that they never play any of the audio of it? You'd think that they would play that over and over again, yet they don't. Why? Because it didn't happen. So then they said, well, he incited the insurrection by suggesting that Mike Pence should not allow the certification to take place, that he should reject some of the electors and send them back to specific states in which there were violations of the law that occurred regarding the voting. Incidentally, it wasn't, people weren't demanding, even the protesters, it wasn't a demand that Trump be appointed president. It was that some of those electors in which you had some of these states where Democrat elected officials violated the election laws and counted votes that weren't supposed to be counted, that Mike Pence reject, not certify those electors, but reject them, sending them back to the states in order to make a determination as to how to move further forward. So now you have, according to polling, a majority of Democrat voters saying that they support doing what they claim defines Trump as an insurrectionist. This was a Rasmussen's report poll. It asked likely voters, quote, some Democrats in Congress have said that if Trump wins this year's election, they'll vote against certifying the election results because of Trump's role in January 6th, which is ironic, of course, because his role, we're told, was questioning the outcome of the election and suggesting that the electors not be certified. So they're asking, in reality, the question here, hey, the thing that you said makes Trump an insurrectionist, do you support Democrats doing that? 57% of Democrats said yes. Nearly 2/3 of liberals said that they also support not certifying Trump as president if he wins. The poll sampled 912 likely voters from March 5th through 7th with a 3-point margin of error. And I think this shows us, unfortunately and sadly, why we have such a problem in this country, because it's not just a few lunatics with totalitarian tendencies. When you have 57% of Democrat voters that are saying, we don't care what the election outcome is, we support not certifying Trump as the winner. which, of course, again, is what they claim made Trump an insurrectionist for suggesting be done during the last election. Where are we? Okay, I'm going to take a break, and then I want to share. There's some information. Fani Willis, okay. In the past, I have described my approach to all of these different cases, and on one hand, you have some folks that really dive deep and they cover everything that's going on. That hasn't really been my approach. My approach is every so often there is in any one of these cases, there will be these little instances that are oftentimes overlooked in the sea of insanity. But for whatever reason, they really stand out to me as something that is interesting and extremely relevant. And there happens to be one of those instances with the case in Georgia. And all that entire case was built upon a recorded phone call that you may recall, where Trump was falsely labeled as telling the Secretary of State to go out and find votes. The suggestion being that he was telling him to, find, go fill out some ballots to do what Democrats do, but that wasn't at all what the conversation was about. It was taken out of context. And Molly Hemingway has written on this, as I'm sure some others have as well. That recording was illegal. Totally and completely illegal. And so some are beginning to note that how can this case even move forward when the entire thing was built off of an illegal recording? Now, you and I, while some of you are attorneys and in law enforcement, many of us aren't, but there are certain things legally that we understand. They're conventional wisdom because they're part of pop culture. You watch Law and Order, you watch all these different shows in which there is some sort of evidence that's obtained illegally, and so a case gets thrown out, or at least anything that was relevant to that illegally gathered evidence gets thrown out, right? And so, this entire case built upon a recording that was illegal. By the way, it was a Republican who made the illegal recording. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk at text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. Molly Hemingway writing that Democrat Fani Willis' legal troubles extend beyond recent revelations that she deceptively hired her otherwise underqualified secret married lover to run the political prosecution of former President Donald Trump and other Republicans in Georgia. And the new book from Mike Isikoff and Daniel Klaidman admits that a widely misunderstood phone call in which Willis's political prosecution rests was illegally recorded. That means the entire prosecution could crumble, with defendants having a new avenue to challenge Democrat lawfare. Find Me the Votes, a hard-charging Georgia prosecutor, a rogue president, and the plot to steal an American election, is a fawning political biography of Willis. For context on the bias of the authors, Isikoff was an original Russian collusion hoaxer, and his articles to that end were used to secure warrants for the FBI to spy on innocent Republican presidential campaign advisors such as Carter Page. For years, the media and other Democrats have held up Willis as a brilliant and credible prosecutor for Republicans, or of Republicans, rather. The new book suffers from poor timing, however, with Willis and her lover accused of perjury, subornation of perjury, bribery, and kickbacks related to the prosecution. Willis, of course, could be removed from the prosecution as early as this week. Nevertheless, the book shares interesting details about Willis's father, John C. Floyd, and his radical past, described as a one-time radical activist who considered the police to be the enemy and an occupying army. Floyd founded the Black Panther political party of L.A. and said of it, "Our political philosophy is black nationalism." He took former Communist Party vice presidential nominee Angela Davis as a lover and lived with her prior to being placed on the FBI's most wanted list for purchasing the gun used to murder a Marin County, California judge. Willis, who was raised by her father, worked for Beverly Hills attorney Howard Schmuckler before he was disbarred and also before he was imprisoned for running a fraudulent mortgage rescue company. She worked for another lawyer in Atlanta who was disbarred for tipping off a drug dealer to an impending DEA raid. At that firm, she represented a crack dealer who turned out to be the male stripper at her bachelorette party, and worked with Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former Atlanta mayor and now a top domestic policy advisor to President Joe Biden. Isikoff provides these details to help readers, quote, understand how Willis became the kind of law and order DA who would unflinchingly take on Donald Trump. Willis ran on a pledge to restore professionalism and sexual ethics to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office and to begin to deal with a backlog of 11,000 unindicted homicides, assaults, shootings, and other crimes. Instead, the night before her official first day, word leaked of a recent phone call between Trump and Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. The phone call had been dishonestly portrayed by Trump opponents, and Willis hoped that Raffensperger had been in Fulton County for the call so she could prosecute Trump based on that false understanding of the call. When she showed up for her first day of work, according to the book, quote, I just remember sitting down and looking at the TV and thinking, maybe he was in Fulton County. She recalled her county. However, the person who recorded the phone call wasn't in Fulton County or even Georgia. That's a problem. Jordan Fuchs, a political activist who serves as Raffensperger's chief of staff, was in Florida, where it is illegal to record a call without all parties to the call consenting to the recording. She neither asked for nor received consent to record. Fuchs was one of the main sources for Isikoff and Clayton's book. They admit in their acknowledgments, while they reward her with effusive praise throughout, she comes off very poorly. For example, she offers a frankly unhinged conspiracy theory that Trump was planning to lose the 2020 election as early as May of 2020 and was therefore floating a plan with the Washington Post reporter to win the election in Georgia through the legislature. She describes how she invented a new policy to block public views of an election audit. She indicates such little knowledge of election laws and processes that she seems to think Georgia requires voters to use Social Security numbers to vote. Fuchs is instead described as a street-smart deputy of Raffensperger, who is obsessed with personal slights, political payback, and her hatred of Trump, his supporters, and his team. Her previous dabbling in the occult is contextualized, along with her shocking lack of knowledge of election law and processes, which brings us to the illegally taped phone call. Now, we're going to get a traffic update, and I'm going to get into this component of it here. After we get a traffic update, look at the weather, the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. First Alert Forecast, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements from Color 10 Fox 49, meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Mostly sunny, high near 73 today, 30% chance of scattered showers tonight, down to 54, 77 and sun tomorrow. 50% chance of showers throughout the day Thursday, high of 76. Wilder RV. If you do not have an RV, I would encourage you to seriously think about taking a day to think about it. Go to Wilder RV. It's in Clint, Missouri. It's just about a little over an hour north, Springfield, straight shot on 13. And find out what that life can be like. Increasingly, we put stress upon ourselves. Increasingly, we find ourselves, doing the scrolling and in front of a computer, and we just don't enjoy life like we used to enjoy it. And in fact, we are oftentimes, as older Americans, critical of younger people because they just don't get out and play like we used to. Well, do we as adults? Some of you do. But it's very easy to get into these patterns of not just getting away from it all. And one of the ways that you can do that is with the RV life. And Wilder RV is your ticket to do this. Now, I'm talking right now specifically to those of you that this would be a new world, because if you have never been part of that world before, you want to start out with Wilder RV. One of the things that I like most about them is they have sort of, I call it a little mini camp or so, where after you purchase it, they go through everything. Here's how you hook this up. Here's how you do this and that. So you don't have to worry about not knowing what you're doing. They do that with everyone, by the way. You don't have to ask for it, whether this is your fifth, sixth purchase or it's your first purchase ever. They go through all of that so you're informed. So think about it as we get into that time of the year where the weather is much more accommodating to enjoy the outdoor life. It may be the best thing that you ever did, and it could start at Wilder RV. You can find him at wilderrv.com, also ksgf.com, Nick's endorsements. There hasn't been there's been so much attention paid to Fani Willis and this affair and the boyfriend and all of the salacious aspects of this, that what seems to get overlooked in terms of the significance is the fact that the entire case was based off of a recording from a phone call that was illegally recorded. This was the phone call that was used in order to spread disinformation that Trump was asking the Secretary of State to, quote, find votes. And the person who recorded the phone call was, when she recorded it, she's a political activist, Jordan Fuchs, and now she serves as Raffensperger's chief of staff. She's a Republican. She hates Trump. But she was in Florida. She was on that call. She was in Florida. In Florida, it is illegal to record conversations unless every single person knows and approves of it, and that was not done. By the way, there was an article in the Daily Beast, and it's left-wing, hailing her as a brave hero for violating this law. You know, if you're a Trump supporter and you violate a law, like go into the Capitol, you deserve to be in prison for 20 years. But if you hate Trump and you violate the law, by recording people without their knowledge, specifically the President of the United States, you're a hero for that. You deserve awards. This is information that is coming out in this new book by Mike Isikoff and Daniel Klaidman. Find Me the Votes, a hard-charging Georgia prosecutor, rogue president, and the plot to steal an American election. And it was written to be a glowing biography of sorts of Fani Willis, but unfortunately, as is noted by Molly Hemingway, the timing of this is a bit unfortunate because it comes out and then all the crap hits the fan regarding Fani Willis. Quote, unlike many of her fellow Republican consultants with whom she has worked, Fuchs had a friendly working relationship with members of the Fourth Estate, Isikoff and Klaidman write, before describing her regular leaks to the Washington Post, which conservatives despise for its left-wing propaganda, hoaxes such as the Russian collusion lie, and smears of conservatives such as Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Fuchs first gave the Washington Post fabricated quotes they later had to retract about a phone call President Trump had with someone in the election office, though Fuchs was not busted for her lie until March of 2021, months after the fabricated quotes were used to impeach Trump. The authors of the book say the embarrassment of being found out taught her the importance of recording phone calls such as the early January 2021 phone call that forms the basis of Willis's investigation. They do not explain how this lesson worked in terms of the space-time continuum, however, because one happened before the other, not after. In any case, Fuchs recorded a phone call between Trump, Raffensperger, and their associates. She ended the call by saying they should get off the phone and work to, quote, preserve the relationship between the two offices. Instead, she immediately leaked the phone call to the Washington Post, which published it hours later. Covering up the crime. This is where the authors of the book admit that the very recording of the call is a crime. Fuchs has never talked publicly about her taping of the phone call. She learned after the fact that Florida, where she was at the time, is one of 15 states that require two-party consent for the taping of phone calls. A lawyer for Raffensperger's office asked the January 6th committee not to call her as a witness, for reasons the committee's lawyers assumed were due to her potential legal exposure. The committee agreed. But when she was called before a Fulton County special grand jury convened by Fani Willis, she was granted immunity and confirmed the taping, according to 3 sources with direct knowledge of her testimony. Now, in the book here, this is why this is important. First off, I don't believe for a minute that she recorded a conversation that included the Secretary of State of Georgia and the President of the United States, and it never once crossed her mind, is this legal? This is supposed to be a politically astute individual who knows that there are laws regarding whether or not you can record people without their consent, and it varies from state to state. The idea that she was just a dumb girl who didn't really know that she couldn't make this record, she only found out afterwards, doesn't fly. Secondly, the revelation in the book that a lawyer for Raffensperger's office asked the January 6th committee not to call her as a witness tells us that they knew. They all knew. Because what they did not want was it to come up that she had illegally recorded that phone conversation. And what we are also at the same time learning, and there is actually a committee that has just issued or opened an investigation into the apparent collusion, according to the evidence, between the January 6th committee and Fani Willis. All of this kind of comes into play here. The fact that the January 6th committee chose not to question her because it might come out that she had done the recording, but that Fani Willis would then give her immunity where she could talk about it. Hemingway continues that Republicans had long suspected Fuchs was the source of the audio tape call, and further, that she had illegally recorded it in Florida. Fuchs had noted in a Facebook post that she was in Florida visiting family around the time of the call. The book describes the close working relationship and secret collaboration of the Liz Cheney-led January 6th committee and Fani Willis's prosecutorial team. Fuchs should have been a major part of the televised show trial Cheney put on, further convincing Republicans that Fuchs had illegally taped the call, and Cheney was helping cover that up. Incidentally, the book portrays Cheney as the real leader of the January 6th committee, that she viewed it as a, quote, platform for her to resuscitate her political career and would, quote, provide a springboard for a Cheney presidential run. Well, guess she missed that one. The authors go on to say that Fuchs would attempt to escape prosecution for the call if a Florida official brought charges by claiming she taped and immediately leaked the call to the Washington Post for law enforcement purposes. The authors somewhat hilariously describe this claim as an effective defense. Fruit of the poisonous tree. The problem for Fani Willis's political prosecution is that the book convincingly shows that the entire prosecution rests on a piece of evidence that everyone now knows was illegally obtained. Never mind that the evidence has also been completely misinterpreted. The authors write, and Fuchs did what was arguably the single gutsiest and most consequential act of the entire post-election battle without telling Raffensperger or Meadows she taped the call. It was all the evidence Fani Willis needed to get started, they write, of the leaked recording, adding, the recording was the single piece of damning evidence that had launched the investigation. With this evidence provided, those persecuted by Willis's political prosecution can argue that the entire investigation is corrupted by the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. That is a doctrine that extends the exclusionary rule that makes evidence inadmissible in court if it was derived from evidence that was illegally obtained. This according to Cornell Law School's Legal Information Institute. As the metaphor suggests, if the evidential tree is tainted, so is its fruit. The doctrine was established in 1920 by the decision in Silverthorne Lumber Company versus United States, and the phrase fruit of the poisonous tree was coined by Justin Frankfurter in his 1939 opinion in Nardone v. United States. The rule typically bars even testimonial evidence resulting from excludable evidence such as a confession, with Fani Willis reportedly saying, the entire investigation into Republicans was the result of a phone call that was illegally recorded. Defendants might pursue legal recourse. It's the latest challenge for Willis, even if the political ally judge reviewing whether she can continue prosecuting Georgia Republicans rule in her favor. And so, once again, here you have the individuals that have been doing everything they can to imprison Joe Biden's political opposition are the ones that continue to violate the law and then give one another, in this case, immunity so they can get away with it. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. Avis, the car rental company, they've got a program for just about everything that's going on in your life. For those unexpected emergencies that pop up, Avis has their daily rental program. For those weekend road trips or those getaways that you are wanting to plan, they have their short-term rental program, and they just created a brand new long-term rental program. Now, this long-term rental program, in case you haven't heard of it, it's a great option for those looking to purchase a vehicle, but you want to test drive multiple vehicles for an extended time before you actually make that commitment. The long-term rental program is also a really good option if you are a person who likes to lease your vehicles, but you're looking for a little more flexibility within a program. And it's also great if you are a business owner looking to add a vehicle to your fleet of vehicles. Now, with the long-term rental program, there's a lot of benefits to it. Some of them are pretty great. You don't have to worry about vehicle maintenance. You can swap out vehicles every couple of months if you wish to do so, and you don't have to worry about taxes or trips to the DMV. And Avis, they've got tons of vehicles to choose from sports cars to EVs, heavy-duty trucks, and even Ford cargo vans, so they really do have something for everyone. Now, if you want any information on any of those programs that I mentioned, just swing by the Avis store. It's located here in Springfield off of Fort and Sunshine. Make sure to speak to Lauren. And of course, you can find all of that contact information for Avis under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
The Department of Veterans Affairs Office, dedicated to rooting out racism and harassment. DEI office, diversity, inclusion, all these wonderful things. Apparently itself is a, quote, hostile, toxic work environment with a permissive culture of rampant gossiping and innuendo, where multiple layers of top officials participated in and covered up sexual harassment, according to an internal agency review. Couldn't happen to a more perfect office, could it?
Like, if you have to offer those DEI trainings, there's probably something that's a little bit deeper rooted within your company or your organization. That's just my thought.
I keep drawing these analogies to the cult. And we were talking in the last hour, and CVS pharmacies, it got released some of the training that employees are forced to do. And when you read these little workbook things they have to fill out, it's cult teaching. It's what people who are in cults go through. And this is also similar to, and this is, again, DEI stuff, cult stuff, where the leaders of the cult essentially behave in all the ways that they claim the followers are not allowed to. Because it's all about obedience to the leadership. And this is yet another example. According to the report, at one point, a senior manager fired a mid-level manager because both men wanted to sexually harass the same employee. Now, understand that. This is not an employee firing another one because one wanted to sexually harass an employee and this was deemed unacceptable. It was a turf war over who got to sexually harass the employee, and so the employer fired the competition.
Yikes.
When the complaint was filed, a political appointee sat on it, apparently partly for racial reasons. I mean, they really got it all mixed into this cake. Sexual harassment, racism, the great utopia of the left. The 125-page report paints a shocking portrait of the 400-person diversity office, in which employees spent much of their time filing complaints against each other instead of serving veterans. Employees engaged in self-aggrandizing, petty turf wars, and planned wasteful events, including one junket in which 9 people traveled to dispense diversity training that was supposed to have been done by one person. Deputy Assistant Secretary Harvey Johnson, the leader of the Office of Resolution Management, Diversity, and Inclusion, retired when confronted with evidence of his department's behavior, as well as allegations that he had swept misconduct under the rug. Archie Davis, the chief of staff for the office, has been moved to a different office pending discipline. See, they always just shift these people around. They never get rid of the problem because the only problem that they ever see is that it gets exposed. And so they have to pretend as if they're doing something about it. So that chief of staff was moved to a different office pending discipline after the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection concluded that he, quote, engaged in misconduct of a sexual nature with a subordinate employee, including while he was in her direct chain of command, sexted with a different subordinate employee, covered up allegations against colleagues, and a slew of other infractions. The findings come as the VA has made some of the most bizarre and inflammatory diversity moves in the Biden administration, including the attempt to ban the iconic photo that celebrated victory over Japan in World War II, and a new policy that could tamper with medical assessments to deny benefits to white suicidal veterans in the name of racial equity. The office is tasked with harassment prevention, equal employment opportunity, and diversity and inclusion for the VA, yet, quote, the very office tasked with enforcing such things itself engaged in wanton harassment and bizarre racism, according to the report. A female employee provided OAWP with messages showing that after meeting Chief of Staff Davis for the first time in early 2023, he began sending her flirtatious texts and copying her on emails in which he bullied subordinates, seemingly to boast of his power and to show what could be in store for her if she did not cooperate. Western Region Supervisor Gary Richardson was also sexually harassing the same employee. She said that he would hound her on Microsoft Teams with personal chatter as they worked, and that he told her when she was not available, he would stare at her photo, quote, to get my fix. When she traveled to D.C. for work, he told her he had a pass from his wife and pressured her to go out with him. On March 2nd, Davis recommended that Richardson be fired for it, writing that the predatory electronic messaging should be sufficient to present Gary with the option of resignation or of retirement in lieu of removal. This was seemingly not because he, as Davis wrote, breached the sacred line, but because he was competition. 9 days later, Davis himself texted the employee, "Good morning, sexy. Ain't just attracted to your curves and those physical attributes that cause men to holler at you. Your bold, audacious deposition and your alpha female demeanor are equally a turn-on for me." Davis subjected her to messages such as one that said, "I want to make you lose your mind when I'm..." Well, I can't even read this. I mean, really, genuinely cannot read it. On another occasion, he sent her porn, texting her at 4:43 a.m. Can't read that. The victim said that Davis, quote, would always try to persuade me with money, such as free trips to D.C., telling her, once you get on his bad side, you'll feel his wrath. By July, when the woman was still not receptive, Davis got snippy, saying, quote, we've been talking for a year and I've made clear my interest. My intent was to have it all with you. And this just goes on and on and on and on. Is there anything in this administration that hasn't, in the 3 years of the Biden presidency, turned into a total, complete, embarrassing disaster of chaos and debauchery? This is the reason that we got rid of Donald Trump. Thank goodness the, quote, adults are back in charge. Yes, thank goodness indeed. All right, well, I imagine the special counsel, her testimony today is going to be quite interesting, though he is no longer special counsel. According to reports, he resigned just prior to what is going to be the testimony he gives today. Now, I don't know. Some of that headlining is being positioned as shocking. I'm not sure if this allows him to say more or if it allows him to say less or if this is something that was expected, wasn't expected. Nonetheless, I imagine that today is going to be a day of great interest with that testimony. So with that, Glenn Beck is next. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm Nick Reed.